Hello, 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 everyone. How are you? Hello. Hi, it is Monday. Welcome to House Calls. It is the Monday before Thanksgiving. Cannot believe this. And I know there's a lot of zaniness in the world, and hopefully everybody is, you know, reducing the sort of how many people are around us. I know we're all looking at the holidays, Thanksgiving, as a very different Thanksgiving, very intimate and small. So that's going to be a different vibe, but, the responsible thing to do. So, anyways, but it is Monday. Happy Monday, everybody. I'm really excited to be here. I'm back up at the lake. I'm out of the city, back in Skinny Atlas. And today I am very excited because we're going to be talking to Simon Jacobsen of Jacobson Architecture, and his father and him and Simon are two architects who I really love their work. It's actually probably my favorite. They're my favorite residential architects. And I love them. I think they could be my favorite architects. Anyways, they're very modern, but they're also very it's historical at the same time and very clean and precise, and I love it. So we are going to see if Simon is on. Let's see if he's there. Oh, there he is. I'm so excited I can't even tell you. Okay, there we go. And very excited. So yes, I don't know if you're familiar. If you're not familiar with Jacobson's architecture, they're out of DC. It's perfect, and it's really they're amazing. So if you should Google it now if you don't know what it is. It's really clean and it's timeless and it's fabulous and I love it. And we're waiting for Jacobson Architecture to connect. And Simon, hello.
Hello.
Hey, Simon, how are you?
Oh, just sitting by the piano like a man does.
I love it. Where are you right now? I love that you're playing the piano, by the way. How are you?
Well, I thought I'd have a little interlude there for the audience. I'm in the country. I got out just before the pandemic, moved my family out here. Hugh Jacobson's out here. Yep. And we bought an old horse farm, and I don't like horses. So it's been really quite a wonderful thing to get out. I mean, I lived in Washington all my life, and then here we are.
Right.
So,
and are you in Georgetown in DC?
Our office is still there.
Yep.
We sold that. We got out of DC altogether,
really?
Because the thing, we were just kind of looking at it, and we work all over the United States. Washington isn't really a capital for us anymore. So we just said, so much has changed, not only because of COVID, and so much has changed with the nature of our work, that we're really we just need to be near international airport.
Right,
and
exactly correct. I totally agree with you. That's fabulous. Well, so first of all, so you're good, family's good, right? The whole family.
Say it again.
I said you're good. The family's good. You have two kids, right?
Right. I got two teenagers, 13 and 18. One's in college in Virginia in film school, and the other is a 13-year-old boy who's just starting out here, and he's distance learning, and that's just he's doing well with it. But it's just upside down world,
It is so bizarre. I know. I have two nieces in New York City. That one is still in high school in the city, and then one is at college in North Carolina, and she's loving it. But it's definitely bizarre freshman year. So, and I'm not even going to see them. I'm not going to see them. I usually see them for Thanksgiving here. I'm up in the Finger Lakes at my house, my country, retreat, and a lake house. And my brother's going to be at his house in the Hamptons because they usually come here. And this is like sort of it looks very like, it's like if Thanksgiving had an aesthetic, this town is it. So, but they're going to be out there. So we're going to all be kind of distant this year, so it's going to be a little bit, a lot smaller.
Everybody got gypped.
Yeah, I know. But you know what? It'll make next year even that much more, of a celebration, I guess. It'll make us appreciate it a little bit more. But that's great. So, you have kids. I wanted to ask you, first of all, let me just start by saying, that I'm so excited to be doing this with you today, because if I'm not your biggest fan, I don't know who else is. I love your work, and I've loved it. I'm just a huge fan. I love it. I've been in your homes that you've done. I have a friend who has one of your houses, who built his house with you. And so I've had the opportunity to really see it, happen in its process, and also in its finished. And it's actually in Nantucket. And then I've also, played there, hung out there. And so it's really nice to interact with it. But the first time I was actually in one of your houses was also in Nantucket. And it was years ago, and I was doing a house tour. And one of the houses that you guys had done was on the tour. And it was just, everything about it. The fact that it's, historically, precise, and at the same time also very modern, is really awesome. But, so I'm happy to know that your family's good and the kids are all cool. And, but one of the things I wanted to ask you was, before we go forward, let's go backward a little bit. Tell us, like, growing up and what that was like, and then kind of bring us from, your background.
Well, it was pretty normal childhood. I shared something with my father genetically, is that I was really dyslexic, and yeah. I think
and me as
that,
well.
Yeah, I mean, I can. There's a lot of things I can do, but sometimes I'm going to be 10 minutes late
yes.
in doing it. Right?
Yeah.
I think that's in the creative process, in the creative fields that you and I are in. I think that is a tremendous leg up.
Yes.
Because one, it's very much a left brain
yes.
kind of endeavor,
yeah.
and
you really have to lean on your left. You have to lean on the visual, because you really have to lean on the visual of everything.
You do.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when I meet little dyslexic boys and girls, I tell them, I think you'd make a great architect.
Yeah.
But my father, Hugh Jacobson, he was terribly dyslexic, and he was, in his early years, was kind of lost. And his father said, well, I want you to go into business, but you also like painting. So he said, why don't you go to architecture school? And he did.
And that's how he found it.
That's how he did it, yeah. And
was your mom also creative?
She was musically creative. And she may have been frustrated, perhaps, but she loved music, and so yes, I would say so. Yeah.
Interesting. Well, I think the idea that someone who's dyslexic would lean on somebody who connect with somebody who's like their sensitivity is not visual, sound.
Right. Well, I think one of the keys on that subject is that dyslexic people have a hard time in school, and they're often having to circumvent normal protocols and norms to achieve something. Hello, design and architecture, because that's exactly what we do. And it comes naturally.
It's creative. Basically, I would say I would designate that as creative problem solving. And that is sort of the foundation of designing and developing space. It's creatively, right?
Ta-da! That's exactly it.
We could write a song about it.
I think we could do a Broadway show.
That's hilarious. So, growing up, one of the things I wanted to ask you, did you know at a young age, were you super interested in what your dad was doing, or did that happen later?
I was super interested in what he was doing. I didn't think I'd be doing it, though.
Right.
He is so talented,
oh my God.
and his career took off very early on. I mean, I was used to his, I don't like the word fame, but I was used to his public
his recognition, right?
And to me, it was completely off guard. It was out of bounds. And but when I started to get older and graduate from college, he did the same thing with me that his father did with him. He says, stop playing music and why don't you go to architecture school? And I said,
Right.
okay, I'll go and see what they know.
Yeah.
And you get
And what
bit
made
by the
you
bug.
choose Chicago? Like, what made you? What did you like? Was it the program? Was it? I'm always interested to know why people choose, especially architects.
Yeah. Well, I think in architecture school, just like in a lot of highly disciplined fields,
Yeah.
you can choose a school by its name,
Right.
or you can choose the faculty that's there at the time.
Right.
And the guys and girls that were there were remarkable at the time, and I think they still are today. But that's what attracted me. I was accepted to other schools, but I chose Chicago because of Peter Eisenman was there, Stanley Tigerman.
Yeah.
Geez, I can't remember the rest. But anyway, there were just a lot of young upstarts that were just brilliant, and I loved it. Greg Lynn, he was another who works with Gary.
Frank Gehry, yeah. That's amazing. I mean, look, one of the things I wanted to ask you is like, when you're in architecture school, right, and your dad is, an iconic American, architect practicing, and did you find that was an advantage or disadvantage in the program? Was that, you know what I mean? Like, did they try to, because I mean, a lot of creative programs, they try to break you down in the first year so that you can, kind of detach yourself from kind of what and then kind of shoot you into orbit and then give you these other things to do. How is that? I think it's a difficult process, I think, for a lot of young people. But I'm wondering, did you feel like that was an advantage or a disadvantage?
It's always an advantage if you're known for something and you're related to something that's good. And
right.
So that is an advantage. But this was a highly theoretical school.
Yeah.
So they viewed my father as just being a pretty architect,
right.
being an
right.
architecture digest. And,
right.
So they were really into, working in the fabric of death into design,
right.
So
right.
that, Hugh Jacobson's pristine white pavilions was not something on their radar.
Right.
The other faculty members.
See, that's crazy to me because I feel like, I really think that's so funny it's interesting to hear that because I just feel like it's such a celebration of modernism, but in a way that is very, it's informed by such, traditional, like sort of, I would say like symmetrical and it's just that clean form. But it feels historical or classic or, it feels like you could pull up to a farm, it could be a farm and it would be the celebration of the vernacular, but in a very crisp, clear way. Yeah. I think.
American building forms, particularly early agricultural building forms, are some of the most powerful forms in the world that our new republic created quite by accident. Even when we look at federal architecture, which was our sort of working man's version of Georgian architecture, it is still when you see a good federal house on the East Coast is usually where they are, or down in South. It's mind-blowing on how simple and elegant it is.
Well, you know what is interesting is that, I have a line of furnishings. And when I first started, that collection, I called it the New American. And the concept is that I loved the simplification of the forms that were American, that were deriving from whether it was English or whatever the influence was. They were these sort of pared down versions of that, and the idea of just sort of finding sort of the clarity of something and then having that be sort of what informs the sort of moving forward. So I love that about taking those agricultural forms and celebrating them and in sort of their simplicity. I love federal probably more than Georgian because of its working class sort of sort of that, because of that clarity. It was out of necessity, it was much cleaner, but in its final
they weren't designed by architects. They were designed out of pattern books.
Right.
And the owners all pointed to the, you know, they were this big, right? The owners would point to the with the builder and say, I think we'd like this one. And of course, it was a Georgian house, and the builder would scratch his head and say, we don't have any iron rods for that tall chimney, and we're going to have this. Is how about we draw something like this, because we can afford to do that, and that's how they took shape, and it's beautiful.
So another question, I totally agree. Interesting, and I actually, it's, you know, I think that sometimes that, you know, that necessity for simplicity is, you know, it can be very, it can be, you know, it's obviously a very powerful creative process that you have to go through to make that, you know, elegant and beautiful. So when you were growing up, did you have siblings did you have brothers and sisters, or were you
Yeah, I had two older brothers, and there's considerable distance between us. I think I was a mistake. So they went into theater and film, and they live on the West Coast. This enterprise didn't appeal to them.
It didn't appeal to them. Isn't that so interesting how, you know, kids can all grow up in the same 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 kids can grow up together, and it's just amazing how different everyone's point of view is. But it's interesting also that there's such a creative line in your family. I have a brother who's an art director, creative director, and I have another brother who's an attorney. So it's like it kind of flux either way in my family. But so now you're growing up. Your dad is, you know, this iconic American designer.
I'm going to travel with you.
Yeah.
Keep talking. We're going to go to spot B.
Now when you're going to college, right? Now you're at, you know, you're getting your master's in architecture in Chicago at the Chicago School of Architecture. And so now where are you, did you think like you wanted to immediately work for your dad? Did you think that you were, did you want to work in other firms to see what was that journey like?
Well, you know, graduation time came, and one has to ask oneself, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
My father, who had invested so much time in me, when I had to get jobs in the summer or on holidays and things, it was at his office.
Got it. So you interned.
So yeah. I was groomed, right? I couldn't apply to any place else in the neighborhood because I think Hugh had talked to them and said, don't hire him. He's coming with me.
That's so cool.
I was going to go to New York. I had some plans with some friends to go to New York and get our stuff out of the way, and then maybe start a firm there, because Hugh always said, boy, if you get one up in New York, you're a big boy, big girl.
That's so
and I said, all right, well, I want to be a big boy. And but there was a problem, and my mother was getting very sick. And so he needed help back home. And so I actually moved across the street in a house, which the same house that you would have seen maybe in Architectural Digest. Renovated that and joined 2 houses together. And I thought, well, I'll be here for a couple of years. Like failure to launch over here, you know? Anyway, so by 2010, she had passed away. And
I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, it happens to all of us.
Yeah, no, it happened to me. Yeah, it happened to me as well.
Well, you look great for being dead so long.
I know. Well, it's like, it's like.
So, so something happened. I mean, Hugh and I really loved working together, and we travel all over the world. We worked in Japan, and we worked in England and France, and there only can be one alpha male in the room, and that's that guy. So our relationship was good because I never stepped on the master's toes and had a lot to learn from him. His way of teaching wasn't to sit down with you and to explain things. Now, this is how you do it. His way of teaching was watch me. This is, so that was his kind of hands-off approach, but it worked pretty well in the dyslexic brain. I could just sit there and I could watch this incredible movie. Right.
I agree. Yeah. And by the way, that's the way I think that's a great way to learn for everybody. But I know it's not everybody's style, but it's definitely mine. And probably because, I mean, when I was right out of school and I was working at Parrish Hadley, I used to have to take, messages for people when the receptionist was out. And I would write the phone numbers completely backwards, and I didn't realize I was doing it. and they would try to call someone, and I'm like, you know what? The last 4 digits, just flip them. Because I always knew 212, obviously.
It was a new client calling, right?
Yeah,
Mrs. Got
yeah.
Rocks.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, swear to God, and they would flip it. It would work. I swear to God, I'd panic. I'm like, and I would like sit there like, and you don't even realize you're doing it. You know, it's kind of crazy. But
it's true.
But I do think that that's awesome that you interned and you were there for the summers with your dad in the company, and you knew what you wanted to do. Are you encouraging your kids to maybe follow in the family business, or is that?
I don't know.
Yeah.
They're young.
They're
so
young. Yeah,
I want them to kind of follow their own thing, and if they want to come back to the herd, and there's always a place for them.
Yeah, that's cool. I love that. That's a perfect way to handle it.
It's just what's the old saying? Architecture has been very, very good to me.
Yeah.
So,
I love that. That's from a basketball have been very, very good to me. I think that was from Saturday Night Live.
So here's the thing, working with Hugh, I was a subordinate, and then I started getting my own clients in my 20s.
Yeah. Well,
and then he started losing those clients.
Yeah.
In his 60s, and we had a sit down moment after a few years of me, his clients coming to me, and I was like, oh boy, this is working out great. And he was like, no, this is not working out great. He was proud of me. But he got tired of opening up the Washington Post or a magazine and seeing something that looked like he did it, but it was done by me. And it's like, way to go, kid, I think.
Yeah, no, that's great. By the way, how exciting is it, first of all, for it to be a family member? Second of all, I think the fact that you share a very similar, approach and aesthetic, I think is awesome. And I would imagine, and I have some questions about this, and I will say, it is your story, your family story, your business story is, I think, one of those. It's very unusual to have such a smooth transition. Like, I think it was always, I think that there was this, seemed like it was done effortlessly. I know family businesses are never easy, maybe, but it seems like you guys kind of had a good handle on it. And even like what you're saying about with your kids, where it's like, hey, I want them to follow their path, and if they come back, this is here for them. But when you started working, right, and you started getting these projects, I bet your dad was like, like, oh my God, but also really happy at the same time. Do you feel like at that moment that you brought sort of a younger perspective to maybe what was, sort of happening in terms of, really not so much aesthetically, but more about maybe the way people live, that I think is dramatically different than the way that families used to live. Certainly families that can afford to have, beautiful bespoke homes. I would imagine that the lifestyle, the layouts have to somewhat acclimate, even though I think your dad's architecture was already very forward. How did that go down?
Definitely, because his solution to this outright thievery of his own clients was to disband his company, Hugh Newell Jacobson PLLC, gulp, and start a new one with me as a partner called Jacobson Architecture.
Yes,
now that is the nicest thing anybody's ever done for me, other than my wife agreeing to marry me. So that was an important milestone. I couldn't believe it, and it was extremely formal and structured. Right. It was a real. It wasn't a hobby shop or an idea. Right. The lawyers were in there, and his firm had considerable assets and work all over the world. And all of a sudden, here's Junior, but Junior has been sitting there all this time anyway, working closely with him. And so to answer your question, so the infusion of new blood in any organization is always, particularly a creative organization, is a really good idea. And you can actually see, I'm told even by my critics, and it's maybe a good thing or a bad thing, but you can, if you look at our website and see the body of work, transition. You can see the transition right away. And it's because, he was getting on in years. By the time that we did this, I think he was close to 80.
Right.
and or less. I think it was 77.
Right.
And so, you kind of stop reading technical manuals about waterproofing at that age, but
Yeah.
the young guys were like, all right,
Yeah, there's
ice
all
and
this,
water
right. Well,
shield.
there's new products, there's new, there's new
Always.
windows and doors, and there's new, there's things have, they've changed a little. So the opportunity to do something that you had to do a certain way
engineering.
20 years ago, you can do it differently now. So, and I think that's important.
Nothing is the same since, as far as building materials. Think about glass, for example. Think about what we're doing with glass. We can actually really build a energy efficient house entirely made of glass.
Out of glass, right.
And
which
a bullet
amazing,
will go through it and a hurricane will knock it down, which is what we do in Florida.
Which is amazing, right.
It is.
So that changes it. I mean, so I will say, yes. I mean, I definitely see the transition. Because so when I was in design school, I actually originally was thinking architecture because that's what I thought I wanted to do. And then I went into the program and everyone said, I said, what do you guys do on weekends? And they were like, nothing, we're always here. I was like, I don't think this is gonna work for me. Because I was like, I knew that I was gonna be needing to be out and about more. But I found interior design sort of realizing that that's really the space I wanted to be in, sort of from the inside out as opposed kind of from the outside in. But your dad's work at that time, I was like, oh my God, this is like perfect. For me, it was like the best of two worlds that were coming together in a really clear way. And
what makes it so intuitive to creative people like you, interior designers that are drawn to our body of work, is that they can, whether they realize it or not, they're able to identify that we designed the interiors first and then the building came second. Right. So
it's following the layout. Yeah.
It's following the layout. It's almost like a very sophisticated bubble diagram.
Right. Bubble diagram. Exactly how I start with projects.
And then it turns three-dimensional in that bubble diagram. And then the art form starts about how we keep that purity in the design on the outside.
Yes. I agree. And I love that.
That's the candy bar.
Yeah,
and
I love
not
that.
Everybody does it that way.
Yeah. And there's a very informal yet formality to the way that the house, sort of lays itself out. It's informal in its openness, but it's formal in its sort of progression, and the way that happens. And what I loved was, I love all of those, I call them portals. I don't know if that's what you guys call them, but they're like those transition moments between one building and another. Or the transition between one space,
like glass links, and those are important. Yep.
Yeah, and I love those. Were like, I mean, to me, because it allows each structure to really be a standalone kind of moment, and then you have these kind of glass. I call them in my mind portals, and I use them. Actually, it's funny. I have projects that I've done more recently where I use that language a lot in my interiors. And also working with different architects and different clients, sort of, creating those sort of almost like a cleansing moment or a portal where you feel like there's this opportunity to, kind of go into this next, like emotion or feeling or whatever it is. Doesn't necessarily have to be a different aesthetic.
The force is strong in this one.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's really cool. I've always loved that about your work, your dad's work, the firm's work. It's really cool. I actually, it's one of the houses. So Don, who you guys did a house for in Nantucket, Harbor Hill, I think was that what they call it. And so that's the house that I had seen, like 3 or 4 times, maybe from beginning to completion, and have gone to dinners there, pool things. And so I kind of experienced it. Interesting.
That's a great place.
Live next door.
Yeah, that's really, that was a terrific project, and working with Don, that was an experience. Amazing. And it's he undertook a very complex building in a very complex place. And, it's we all got out alive on that one, and it came out really great. But it was like building an airport.
Yeah.
It had so many mechanical systems and complexities in the waterproofing. The thing is entirely made of ice and water shield. I mean, it's beautiful.
Right. I mean, we'll look, because of where it is, and also what's underneath it and all that. And it's pretty, it's very sophisticated.
Well,
at that
the
level.
secret of that layout, was not to jam the view down your throat every 5 minutes. The
Right.
building turns and twists and looks
Right.
someplace else,
Right.
and so it
Kind of
has.
right.
Yeah, some houses, we've certainly seen them, and the view can get tedious. It's so special and cute. That's why beach houses should never look directly at the sea. They should look up and down the beach because that
Right.
line is always there,
Right.
and it becomes tiresome.
Yeah. Well, it also
So
also it just feels like when you get to see it, it feels more special. And then when you're seeing other things as well, it allows you to have, I think, to take advantage of more of the site and more of the environment than just that one moment. And when you do get it, you're like, you're wowed by it and you appreciate it. But, and it also allows other spaces to feel a little less, vast. You know what I mean? I think sometimes it's nice to have the seagrass in front of you and see other things and have another, feel a little more human than just like this,
we are
entirety.
people. We are people of the earth, after
Yeah,
all.
yeah,
If we're all not sailors, and so we need
yeah.
to we need to see the grass.
That's so funny. So when you brought the new perspective to, it feels like you were, I would say that, there was it feels like the transition went well, obviously for the firm, it's done, you guys are amazing and still, on the forefront of what you do, which is amazing. Do you feel like your dad supported that process? Because it sounds like he did. Like
He did.
supportive.
Yeah, and he was confident in me to be able to execute these things.
Yeah.
Not only in the way that he would do them, because there's a formula to our work that came from him, right?
Right.
And I certainly learned that formula at a young age. But to be able to execute it now with just a new view on the situation, and to take some of the earlier aspects of his work that I felt that he had left behind and bring them back out again.
Right.
He was moving away from these simple pavilions, and this was a time when we designed like you designed. We were working on an artistic problem, and we hadn't solved that problem yet. We hadn't hit the nail on the head, and we hadn't found the ideal composition of these pavilions together. And so we went back to that almost immediately. But the difference is we started detailing them with more militancy. And so because of that, these buildings became rather unintuitive to build. Nobody had ever seen drywall done like this, these gaps. If you remember in Nantucket, there's all of these gaps, these black gaps everywhere that separates. And what that does is it makes the walls float, and it makes it not just a drywall job, it's actually some detail in there. Well, those are not for the faint of heart. And so we had to
it makes it special, and it gives it a detail that allows it to be simple, but it feels like it's very intentional. And there's a reason for it, as opposed to it just being clean.
Exactly.
I love that.
And then on the interiors, and you see this on the exteriors as well, I really wanted to emphasize what these houses really are a series of planes. There's a plane, a void, and a plane. Well, that void in there is actually a door. Most of us live in houses where we walk through a hole in the wall, right? 6'8".
Right.
Well, in our buildings, it's a plane starts, it ends, another plane starts, right? That's either a piece of glass, a window, or a door, right? So everything is full height, and that's the language. And so there's some things that need to be worked out with a builder and how we're going to do that.
Well, because there's a lot of complicated. It sounds simple, but it almost is more complicated because you have to really. It has to be very intentional, and there has to be every detail has to be worked out.
We draw everything, which is another problem, because you start producing a set of drawings for supposed to be a small 3,000 square foot house, and it's 125 sheets. Now that we have to draw everything, but at the same time we can't spook the builder. Right. It's like, oh my God, what is this thing? It's like, well, no, because we have to draw this simple little way we're going to turn the corner, because I know your drywall guy is going to build a house that he grew up in with his parents, and he's going to make it look like that. So we're telling him this is how it's going to go right here.
Well,
and it's every little corner.
That's interesting. Yeah. Yes, agreed. And one of the things I wanted to ask you, I know you're working on a project, you're maybe kind of finishing it, maybe even, which is in Maine, and the original structure was from like 1663, and you created this modern. I mean, isn't that amazing? And you created this modernist compound. I mean, I want to know more about this project, and also like when you start something like that, is there like in that original structure, were there things about it that became sort of a defining detail or something that it becomes sort of a unique sort of fingerprint to that project, or how does that beginning work?
Well, the house was finished about a year ago.
Got it.
It's been published. Digest didn't want it for some reason.
Really?
Or they didn't want me. But anyway, I thought it was great for them. I kind of designed it with them in mind, and Mr. Cocker was like, oh, I don't know why. So
that's interesting. That's very interesting, actually.
Yeah,
but
you can't. Actually, the publication business is crazy.
It's a really bizarre moment. But I have to say, I do think that like a lot of what you do, even though I get it feels more el decor. I mean, to me, like for an American magazine, the work feels more creative in that way. I think that sometimes they might be more driven by who the people are that live there, so much more so than it is about the actual design.
That's the phase for now. I mean, we've seen them from Paige Rent to Margaret Russell. They go up and down, and you just try to get on that wave. It's a great magazine to be published in.
It is. No, it's a great magazine. I love it. It's one of my favorites.
There was a time when we were never not in it, and we became one of those people.
But there's also, I have to say, what's really interesting is, and I do think that there's actually more and more, I think as magazines there's sort of new magazines that have come out that are Gallery is great, and Milou is great. I mean, there's like other magazines that I'm also really interested in. And also it's very interesting now that you can have 100,000 people looking at your images on your site.
Mm-hmm.
You can
get
about
about 1.5 million hits a year
in a variety of different ways. It's not even as traditional for us as the designers or the architects, the way that we kind of introduce people to what we're doing and have them connect with it. So I think it's a double-edged, kind of moment, which is very interesting. But so when you did that house, like, what was it about that original structure was there something that came out of that original structure that may have been either different than something you've done before? Because I'm assuming 1663, it was probably a pretty clean, sort of vernacular, right?
Yeah. Well, right. And the thing is that the old house, the old manse, they called it Bray House, was buried within some very bad additions that were added onto starting around 1900. And so you couldn't even get a sense of what Maine's oldest house actually was, unless you're someone like me. And so I made a very unpopular decision with the town to tear down the other buildings from 1950. They were all connected to it, and I had to say my piece in town hall with the whole town there.
Right. And were those pieces more in the spirit of like that sort of the time in which they were built, as opposed to sort of respecting or being neutral enough to allow the main thing to be kind of what it was?
They were insensitive and unthought out.
Right.
And
then
they were built during the Depression. There was an economy job. Structurally, it wasn't even going to work out. Right. Darrell Hall from Hall & Oates owned it previously, and I think he got some kind of Anyway, he tried to restore it and then ended up selling it to the new owners. But it really just needed an infusion of vision from the owners and an infusion of cash to get this thing where it is. And so, we isolated the old building. We have it on our website. We can just see it standing out there in the snow, being held up with twigs and stuff like that. And then you kind of know what this thing needs to be. It almost got torn down by other people. It wasn't protected in any way.
Right.
And so this thing was on the chop and could have been easily torn down by anybody who bought that. So we had to do something. We had to bring her back, and that we were always going to make that the main part of the show. Everything we put around it was going to be smaller and denser, and it was never going to rise above it. And we had a little saying, this is, she's the belle of the ball, all eyes on her. And so we designed the new compound to play a second part.
It's a secondary role, right?
And we totally messed,
neutral, right?
Right, and we totally messed with the proportions and the scale of the new building to make the old building look larger. And some of the things we
give
did,
it a presence.
yeah, we gave it a presence. We didn't have to match all of its bits and pieces, but for example, its wood siding was 7 inches or something. Ours was 3. Everything was smaller. You know, our roofs never went higher than anything. Our spring lines, like wall to roof on the inside, 7 feet, not 8. Anything to keep this thing down. Right.
So there was a hierarchy.
Yeah, right. And so that's the rabbit you constantly chase.
Yeah. Well, that's what I love about your work, and that's what I love about what the way that approach to me is like music to my ears, because it's like that is to me what that's the creative problem solving, is how do you take something that is so beautiful and in and of itself and it has a very sort of specific vernacular, and how do you then attach these newer pieces to it that are respectful of it and that allow it to be sort of the grand dame, but also, you know, that they function and make sense for the way that we live today. And I have to say, I mean, I would imagine that, you know, a lot of architects, when they go and meet with a town or, you know, try to get things approved, I mean, your aesthetic, as modern as it is also very, it always feels very appropriate. So, I mean, there's like I think there's probably a freedom that you have that some architects, you know, I mean, they seem like they, you know, I mean, I feel like that it's a very American vernacular that you can see it in a lot of different situations, and it feels honest and straightforward and clear. And then if there is something that is on the site that it's celebrating, like this one, you know, I think it allows it to kind of do that.
Well, let me touch on that, because, and I'm speaking also to the other designers who are watching this, is that if you're going to be successful in a project, you have to take an emotional ownership of it. And you have to even take it away from the owners from a period of time, because you have to invest yourself. If this is going to be important, it requires all of your time and energy and focus. And you need to be second guessing yourselves about things, because you're not always right the first time. But we have a saying in the office is that the further away you get from the original idea, the worse it's going to be. So we really believe in the initial kernel of knowledge, of design knowledge, of what you originally come up with. You go, yeah, that would work. And then, but you know, a project has a tendency to get watered down with so many players involved, right? But the architectural office, the critical office, simply has to keep that game in mind and always keep going back to the original idea. That's our take.
I agree. Well,
but I mean, you have to be the custodian of the job, you know, for a time.
Also,
and then
once you have that idea and it really starts to come to life, there's a lot of the solutions and the answers actually are you're taking almost, they kind of answer themselves. It's just being, you're saying, like being like the custodian of those, making sure that things are following. It's almost, the answers are there. It's just when people start to go off on these other tangents that it starts to lose its clarity. Well,
that's what Hugh Jacobs, imagine this. I mean, Hugh Jacobson worked for the Mellons and Jackie O, and he worked for some pretty serious, he worked for the Shark Tank. And he would say to them, and I couldn't believe it, he would say, it's not your building yet, it's mine. Some people didn't like that. Some people didn't like that. We kind of put that aside.
I think you can say that at a certain point in your career, and probably a certain point in your, like, maybe where you are, I would say, in, I don't know, like maybe an age or a career level. But I think to say it in a nice way is always a good idea. But I also think that, you know, at some point, that's what you kind of have to do that. So, and let me ask you a question. You're doing a new book with Rizzoli, right? It's going to be out in 2021. Jacobson Architecture. It's going to be 12 houses and interiors, right?
Right.
How did you choose the 12 houses? Was that difficult? I mean, how did that go?
Well, the other books we produced, they had 15, and we wanted to do something a little smaller because we have another. We don't want to wait. Hugh would wait years to capture them all. What we wanted to do is like, all right, let's do 12. Let's do 12, and then when we're going to have another 12 in a year and a half, and then we'll do the next 12 houses. Right.
Well, also, I think people like things in bite-sized pieces now, and I think people are they're very used to getting information in a more consistent way that rather than just like a big sort of research.
This book is going to be 10 inches by 10 inches.
Yeah. And I want to ask you, architecture and the relationship between architecture and interiors. How do you see that relationship? I mean, I work with architects all the time, so I'm interested. And by the way, my dream is to work with you guys. I would literally.
I have a contract on me.
But how do you see that relationship from interiors to?
They're exclusive of each other, and I'm always dismayed that architects look at that as something separate. Right. Well, you and I have seen a lot, and we've probably even been involved in some of them, where there's so many chefs in the kitchen, the building loses its je ne sais quoi. It has nothing to it anymore. It's gone. You have to appease everybody, make decisions that you hate the least because of somebody else.
Right.
That's why we do the whole thing. We do, like yourself, we have our own furniture line. We make our own furniture. We design all of our own lighting. We design our own windows and doors. We don't open catalogs. We can do that stuff. That's how we achieve, that's how we can select these, we don't have to select a product that's going to work the best. We design the thing that's going to be the best for what it has to do. So when it comes to interiors and architecture, they're most successful when they're done within house by the same company, the same group of people, unless there's just a great marriage, which of course there has been.
That's what I was going to just say, because I will tell you that I think that whether it's in-house or it's someone that's not in-house, it's got to be somebody who is very on point with the architecture and understands that, but is also on point with the lifestyle of the architecture and the lifestyle of the home and the location. And I do think that even within the same firm, I think it's really important that the architect and the designer, even that are not the same person. And I think that even when they're from the same firm, I think that's great, but I think it's important not to be the same person. And I think that I just think it gives it another, I don't know, to me it feels like it gives it a stronger, I don't know, like it just, but it has to be a good marriage. It can't be someone who's like, doesn't really understand what's happening architecturally and what the focus should be, in a space. Sometimes it's comfort, sometimes it's architecture, sometimes it's the view, sometimes it's the fire, sometimes it's the glass. You have to understand that. And I think that that's generally where it's sad to me, because I feel like when we work with architects, I think we always get a high rating. But a lot of architects that I've worked with have had very low ratings of working with people that makes them a little like, they're a little gun shy. And I think that, I think that sometimes, but anyways, I like a great team, whether it's, when we start, we always want to start with, in the dream project, it is the designer, the architect, the landscape, the contractor, hopefully, and you really have like this team that really sort of works well together.
But it's a tragedy when you're forced to, sometimes the owners will just say halfway through the project, we're bringing in this other person. There was I don't mind mentioning her by name, Sally Sirkin Lewis. We were working in Bel Air, Fox and Canyon Drive. We were designing a house for the owner of Architectural Digest, Bud Knapp. And none of this is confidential. Sally came in. I mean, it's probably one of the most important buildings that we've ever done as a residence. It was fantastic. It was made of limestone. Chef Nobu lives there now.
Yeah,
but
I know the building.
The interiors were unpublishable. Even the owner of Architectural Digest was like, "Well, we're not going to run it."
Yeah, let me just tell you this though. I also think that is, I don't see that aesthetically as making any, even just as a philosophy. Before you even get down to like the silhouettes and the fabrics, it's like that as soon as you said that,
mauve.
That's not a great. I don't think that would make sense. And it's not a. It's a decorative. That's a decorative approach.
It is, and that's a kind of I think a really good example of, you had all of these players, these really professional players. You had the owner of a major design magazine, all coming together in this incredible site, and it just fell apart.
Yeah. That's so crazy. Is that what is one of your, I mean, like, you guys have obviously, your firm has worked literally all over the world. You guys have done such amazing, from residential to commercial, projects. Is there one project that you, when you think back on it, that it's like something that it was you connected with emotionally the most, or that you loved the most?
It's the stuff we're doing now.
It is.
We're still trying to solve that problem. And that funny little pavilion problem, and how do we get that to be perfect, and how does and how are we going to have it played out with other pavilions and make those interior spaces as best as we can make them.
This is an interesting. I think this is a question that's very difficult for a lot of architects and designers, but I always ask it because it's interesting to hear how people either know what they have, like an answer, or they kind of fumble through it. How would you describe your style, the style of Jacobson?
We really consider ourselves modern architects.
You do.
Okay,
that's interesting.
Let's look at the history of how we got there, though. You've mentioned correctly that we have this kind of historic tone to it. Well, where have we been working that would cause us to have to pull back a little bit? Well, we're building in these HOAs. We're building in neighborhoods now where they're gated communities, or there's some kind of architectural review board, and they don't know anything. And
oh my God.
So we can't go forward with what we want to do. So we have to kind of really melt down these structures and simplify them to get them to be just like the Center Hall Colonial down the road.
Right.
But we don't let go of the rabbit. We have to meet that weird building code. One of the harshest ones was in this beautiful development in Windsor, Florida, called Windsor.
Oh yeah, I love Windsor. I've been there. Yeah. It's a really cool spot. And by the way, really, I would imagine that your architecture there would be really make sense.
The building code that was developed by Zybert and Dwani is a masterpiece, but it's for the guys like us who build these funny little pavilions, it's really hard to get it by. But we've been successful because we just pour ourselves into it again. But it's like the old saying, I'm really 25, I just look 55 because of Windsor, but we get it done.
Let me ask you a question. What most inspired, like right now, like is there not one, but I'm sure there's many, but is there something that you feel truly inspired by? It sounds like it's really understanding the pavilion, like getting that kind of, but is there something that you can identify as like an inspiration?
Yeah, it's getting all of this great glass into it.
Right.
And we really, it's a cliche when you say it, but our language doesn't really have a way to describe it. Making sure that when you're standing inside a room on a giant piece of glass, that there's no transition at your feet between the inside and the outside, right? So your eye just carries.
It just blurs, right?
Yeah, you'll see it in our work. It's not easy to do. it's easy to draw, but when you actually have to build it and waterproof
it work and make it hit all the codes and everything,
right? A hurricane code and all of that.
Depending where you're
That's another thing that we chase, and that's often the very first things that we're designing. And really, the only stock parts that we're pulling out of the catalog are the largest pieces of glass available in the United States.
That's cool.
And
I worked with a company out of Germany. We were doing a lot of modern, really fabulous. I think you would like a lot of the stuff that we're actually doing now. Is it Victrosa? Was the window company from? Is that what it's called? From Germany? They're amazing, and it's just sheets, and they're huge, and the detail is bronze, and it's so thin that it looks like it's just a sheet of glass.
It's beautiful. And it operates.
Projectile proof up to like 150 miles per hour with a 2x4 shooting straight into it. It'll shatter, but it won't break. I mean, it's pretty incredible. So it is amazing what they're doing in that space of glass and having it so that you can do these amazing things. Very expensive.
It is, and we're going to see the end of insulated glass because we can't stop it from fogging up, and we're going to be using 1-inch pieces of glass that are. This is kind of technical talk and not that exciting, but I really see a future where it's all going to be low E, low iron, 1-inch pieces of glass. And that's going to be our insulation. That's how we build our stuff. And they never fail.
Is there a, do you have, I mean, you guys have done everything and you're amazing. And it's like,
never done a hospital.
It's hard to ask. You haven't what?
We haven't built a hospital.
Well, I was going to say, do you have a dream project? Or is there something that you're interested in doing that you haven't done yet?
I think what you and I are really, really good at is making sure everybody can put their shoes away.
Yeah.
And I've gotten good at it, and I want to keep perfecting it. So I've renovated yachts and airplanes, and those were exciting. Then you watch them fly away, and they never come back. So, well, I guess that's that. So, it's really neat. And I really enjoy just making something out of nothing. And
I love
a custom design house is like custom clothing.
Right.
When I was a young student, I asked Philip Johnson. I said, I mean, if you consider yourself such an artist, that means your clients are patrons of the arts. And he went, yes, that's right.
Yeah.
That's the way I see it.
So I love that. That's wonderful. So I would say another question I wanted to ask you, have you ever had a really bizarre request from a client that was something that you had to accommodate?
I think it's kind of bizarre that somebody would call me up and ask them to design them a house. I think I'd never take that for granted because that's a big step. This person is really vulnerable right now, and they're calling me, and I just get so excited about it, and then they relax. But there's some weird. I had some strange client that didn't want any mirrors in her house down in Florida.
That's interesting.
Yeah,
that's very strange.
And then I found out why.
Though, I will tell you, like when you said you haven't done a hospital or something like that, but I do think that design is going to be a big. It's going to be very helpful in how we design all of these places where we have to come together now post-COVID, and really creating whether it's stadiums or where we see concerts and. Or if it's just restaurants and hotels, how we develop and design them so that they can acclimate if this is necessary again, and how they can make people feel safe and all of that. We have like 30 seconds. I wanted to also ask you, how Thanksgiving plans? Are you guys, what are you doing for Thanksgiving?
Well, we're listening to Dr. Fauci. We
That's
have,
what we're doing.
My father's at a vulnerable age. So I have a daughter in college who regularly gets tested, and our little boy is, our pod is spread everywhere. So we're gonna stay out here in the country.
That's what I'm doing.
We were gonna have a big party, like we usually do. The Jacobson clan often has 20 people for Thanksgiving, and
that's what I do.
We're out here now, and we're just gonna keep it quiet and focus on Christmas, and hopefully we'll be okay for that.
That's great. Well, first of all, I want to wish you a happy Thanksgiving. I want to thank you so much for doing this. I'm a huge fan. Hopefully, I will be able to hire you guys. So you have to work with me to do my house. But anyways, I'm really a big fan. This was really awesome to have an opportunity to chat with you. And I love what you guys are doing and what you've done. And I'm excited to even see more about what you guys are doing with the new book, which I'm really excited about. I will be one of the people that buys that. So thank you again. Happy holidays. Stay safe and healthy. And keep doing awesome things in design, because I know I appreciate it. And I know a lot of other people do as well. So
well,
thank
we're
you.
working. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Have a great holiday. Take care. Stay healthy. And thanks for being here. Thanks everybody who's watching this now and who will watch it and upload it in the future. This is awesome. Simon, you're amazing. Thank you. Have a great day. Bye, guys.